Lord, according to thy word. Accept, I beseech thee, the freewill offerings of my mouth, O Lord, and teach me thy judgments. My soul is continually in my hand, yet I do not forget thy law. The wicked have laid a snare for me, yet I heard not from thy precepts. Thy testimonies have I taken as an heritage forever. For they are the rejoicing of my heart. I have inclined my heart to perform thy statutes always, even to the end.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing the book of Psalms. Psalm 10. Psalm 10, as I've talked about briefly, mentioned as we've been going through 9, is connected to 9 via an irregular acrostic psalm. A regular acrostic psalm, one that you can't miss, is like Psalm 119, which is what I was just playing a little bit there. Well, they have that A, B, C, D, and the first letter of the verse will begin with an A, and maybe it'll be several verses or a certain number of lines, like 4 lines, A, and there'll be 4 lines, and maybe the first one begins with A. Maybe all 4 of them begin with A. Next line, B, and then all those lines will begin with B. That's what acrostics are like. And at least that's one kind of acrostic. There are more than one kind of thing. Well, this one is obviously a different kind. It's irregular, and it does not have the same number of lines for each letter. I know that's one feature, and that's not, that's what I think it's meant by irregular. It might. I don't know how you have an acrostic with missing letters, but there are definitely not the same number of lines for each letter. But they're also connected logically, which a lot of the Psalms are not logically connected in their order. Well, they have been ordered this way for a long time, and there is definitely a sense and also a general grouping of the Psalms overall. We talked about the different ways in which people have recognized like a Genesis section, an Exodus section, a Leviticus, Deuteronomy section, Numbers. I was like, well, I'll have one of the books out. Anyways, of course, the beginning of Psalms is the Genesis section. And anyways, remember the last thing he had talked about in this section in Psalm 9. I was talking about the judgment of God and how it's righteous. The wicked are going to have their ultimate end. The needy shall not always be forgotten. The expectation of the poor shall not perish forever. And with the call for God to arise and to prevent the wicked from prevailing, let the heathen be judged, put them in fear, right? Ends with a Selah. And notice there's no postscript, like to the chief musician upon anything, and then it doesn't start off the next one, the Psalm of David or anything. There's a division in chapter, and I'm sure it's always been there, but it's sort of like a 2-part song. Because Psalm 10 begins, "Why standest thou far off, O Lord? Why hidest thou thyself in times of trouble? The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined." And there's a very, common feeling that even though that we know and we have faith that God's judgment will be executed, there's this thought like, why doesn't he do anything right now? And this is something that a lot of times a question Christians don't like to confront. I mean, I know that when I lacked understanding, I shouldn't like to confront it particularly. I didn't know how to, I hear sometimes easy answers. People say like, well, why doesn't God do miracles today? And then cessationists who say, well, miracles ceased at a certain point. Well, yeah, and the truth is, as far as that goes, I mean, the miracles of Jesus' days were primarily to testify to Jesus and also to the power of the early of God in the church, in the early church, the power of God in the church in the early church. But that doesn't mean it's like there's no possibility of future or isolated or at any time. But the purpose of large public spectacles is to have a large public effect, and and whether or not that sort of thing happens is going to be dependent on what God's desire is at that time. It was not merely for us to, like I said, there are a lot of reasons why maybe it's not a good idea, depending on what God's goals are. A lot of times people think God's goals are merely to make everyone believe, to get everyone to believe, because we preach the gospel, we preach people that they should put their faith in God. Oh, God could sure help out by doing some miracles and bringing about some justice. That would help. Well, I believe if the justice was carried out immediately for the sins that men do, men would definitely give heed. You'd hardly have to preach to them, But also, the justice which ought to be done for men's sins goes beyond what a lot of us could bear. If justice was carried out immediately upon every man in the world. Where do you want God to stop? Just him? Just that bad guy? I was saying the other day, we talk about praying for our enemies, right? And it's like, it's not necessarily like, just bless him. Well, bless him, but, maybe like Paul, who was struck blind on the road to Damascus. Most people don't think being struck blind is any sort of blessing. Strike them blind so that they might see. Or as Jesus said, do good to them, for in so doing you shall heap coals of fire upon their head. The purpose of doing good is to provoke. The purpose of, to provoke preferably to repentance. God does not, it says, he doesn't delight in bringing about justice to the wicked, as far as because, might as well throw yourself in there too. But he'd rather that the wicked turn from their ways, as far as that is pleasing to God. That isn't how it happens, and God made many wicked that will not turn, and then he will not help them turn. He could, I remember, it struck me, this is 20 years ago, I guess, a little over. This is 2002, 3, somewhere like that. A little under is what I meant. But I remember someone said to me, I was talking about God loving everybody, because that's what I thought at the time. Loving them all in the same sort of way a parent loves a child. Because I believe God loves everyone, and that he reigns on the just and the unjust. He shows his love to all. And all that exist are partakers of God's goodness and love. You know what I mean? Just by living in this world, you exist. You are tasting of something that represents God's love. It's not you're not absolutely immersed in nothing but love. Just like I love my wife, but that doesn't mean there is nothing but love in our relationship. There are other, there's sometimes serious discussions or practical discussions or whatever, or there could be even conflict. Even a parent and a child, as Paul talks about, there's chastisement, right? But when you think about what justice ultimately means for the wicked, whether you agree with me that it's death, or you still have the traditional view that it's eternal torture, I cannot reconcile that idea with the idea that God loves them as a child. Is that how you love a child? Is you kind of like, well, I can't interfere with their free will. They've got to do what they're going to do. I'll just sit over here quietly and kind of send signals. Like very subtle signals that they can barely recognize. I'll stand far off. I'll hide myself. So that they're easily able to believe I'm not there. And then when they do wrong, I'm not going to step in and like with the Apostle Paul and give them chastisement that provokes repentance. No, I'm just going to let it go. And then at the end, I'm going to judge them and cast them in the lake of fire, which burneth with brimstone. And instead of dying as one might expect, instead of perishing as that metaphor or analogy or whatever you want, as that would provoke the human mind to think like, well, what would happen to me if I got thrown into a volcano? What would happen? What do I think would happen? Then I'm going to hang out there for a while? I'll be conscious until they come get me? Anyways, so my point is just that if you believe that, well, I find it hard to reconcile that with the idea that he loves them as you love a child. God loves, but there are degrees. It's not the same for all. And that's according to his will. And I don't know how, like I said, philosophically, I don't know how you can have those two ideas in your head at the same time. Until you make God just kind of lame. Oh, I'm so sorry. I have to do this. Why's he got to do anything? God can do whatever he wants. He's God. He doesn't have to torture people forever if he doesn't want to. He's not like forced. Well, the rules say. There's just rules that even I have to obey. The only rules he has to obey are his own rules that he makes up. He's God. He is the very essence of existence. Personified. Not just personified, but he is the person that is existence, from which all things that exist come, from whom, the standard by whom, from whom all rules are derived. All law proceeds from the mouth of God. As far as, like laws of the universe type stuff. Stuff where it's like, this is what that means. This is right, this is wrong. Right and wrong are not arbitrary concepts of, I think what I mean is they are. They're concepts that proceed forth from God. He declares what's good and what's evil. Just because it's like, well, of course, we think it's all very obvious. Not so necessarily, because men do not entirely agree with God, because they don't have God's perspective. Why does God hide himself in time of trouble? Why? Why does he stand far off? My answer to that question would be, I would point to Romans, where it says, "For it pleased him, in bringing many sons to glory, to make their captain of their salvation perfect through sufferings." But it's not the rest of it. But the idea is, in bringing sons to glory, there are things that please God. Whether it was the sufferings of Christ, whether it's things I have to suffer, whether it's things that generally the world suffers and endures, whether it's just the general suffering of the world, that God deemed it necessary, and not only and that it was just. God doesn't have to show himself to us. It is only because we have the sense that he has promised he will save us. We have the sense that he has promised that he would hear our prayers and deliver us if we walk uprightly, right? Or if, in the case of a Christian, because we put our faith in him. But in the Psalms, it's going to be a lot about he who walks uprightly, right? For us, we want to be those who put our faith in him, which is not very different from walking uprightly. It's just a different path to uprightness. It's not relying on ourselves to be upright, but relying on Christ. And Christ is the power by which we turn what is essentially a judicial uprightness into an actual uprightness, because through faith in him means we give heed and seek out what gifts God has to offer us, that we might be more like him. So God sometimes does hide himself, or it will feel that way. God is never really literally hiding himself, as it says in Psalm 22. He doesn't despise the affliction of the afflicted. He doesn't hide his face from them. Neither hath he hid his face from them. But when he cried unto them, him he heard. I think I've quoted that several times, and I actually was looking this morning for the part of, I didn't actually clip that part of the song of Psalm 22, which I've done. But let me just show you what I'm talking about. One of the most famous forsaken psalms is Psalm 22. And the reason I talk about the wicked in this context, because it does talk about the wicked, but the point is, like, if God brought about justice immediately, we would all suffer. You know what I mean? If he brought about salvation immediately, there are other things that would not be, such as things that his sons require to be heirs of eternity, or to inherit everlasting life. Maybe a better way to put it. Dogs, right? This is, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me, God? Why are you standing far off and you don't care? And that's how it feels. I mean, that is the human perspective. That's not how God sees what's going on, but that's how we see it very often. It feels just like that. As on the cross, that's how it felt for Jesus. God was all, here I am. I'm on the cross. What about the salvation? God's supposed to protect me. God's supposed to keep me from evil. And this is, for he hath not despised nor abhorred the affliction of the afflicted, neither hath he hid his face from him. But when he cried unto him, he heard. That's the transition point of that psalm. And the rest of it's all good. The kingdom is the Lord's. He's the governor. Right? And the end being is because God has done this. It's his work. He's got a work going on. We don't always understand it. In the midst of it, we can feel forsaken. But just as Christ from the cross, everything seemed, in this, when I'm talking about the cross, this is the psalm where it says, I am poured out like water. Dogs have compassed me. They part my garments among them. And of course, oh yeah, there you go. 16. They pierced my hands and my feet. They pierced my hands and my feet. And that's the psalm we're talking about. We're talking about Christ and him crucified. And ultimately, Christ being crucified is the answer of God to the question, God, why have you forsaken me? The answer is, I haven't forsaken you. I have sent my Son to bring about your salvation. God does not stand far off. He's very near. We have the author of our salvation is not someone who cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but in every way, like as us, he was tempted in every manner. He suffered things the way we suffer things. He felt pain. You know what I mean? He was not crucified, and it wasn't just like, hey, I can take, I'm so happy to be up here, happy to be here and serving you all today, laying my life down, being crucified. But instead it was, God, Father, let this cup pass, if there be another way. Is there some other way I can save people other than being crucified? Because actually looking at it from right down here in the flesh, as a man, feeling a man's feelings, I don't particularly feel like I want to go do this. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, he said. He inhabited a limited body, limited to space. He was in God incarnate, and in the flesh he was a man. But still God, but also, it's a very, I mean, you can't completely contain God in a body, but you can't even completely contain God in a single person. And it's not according to the Trinity doctrine. We have God in three persons. One God, one being, but he is manifest as the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. The wicked in his pride doth persecute the poor. Let them be taken in the devices that they have imagined. They imagine certain devices. How can we take the poor? How can we rip people off? How can we, it's not just, it's like I said, it's not just poverty, but it also, the idea of humility. Also of simplicity. Some people are rich in machinations, rich in clever schemes. Other people are just going about their lives, and there are people thinking about how can we fleece them? How can we take away, how can we somehow use them? How can we somehow extract from them value for ourselves? And there's nothing more pleasing than seeing someone who's laid a trap for someone else become ensnared in their own device. Like they do all the, they prepare everything and they themselves get caught up in it. That the irony of that is always pleasing because, they say, hoisted by their own petard. I forget what a petard is. I think it was, whatever. Or upon their own petard? But basically like something you prepared for someone else, you prepared it. It's also when you see someone, I've seen in I don't remember any particular movie, but like where they used the same device against the hero, where his own, maybe not the hero, because that wouldn't make a good movie, but against maybe a sympathetic figure early in the story, will be, hurt someone with their own thing. Shoot a man with his own gun. Murder a man in his own home. It's like the opposite. It's the wicked version of that. It's not that they're caught up in some wicked device. It's not pleasing at all. It's always most disturbing. And when you think about your own home, a place you feel secure, it's the place you least, least expect to encounter evil. To encounter evil there, it makes all people feel insecure. You hear about like a home invasion or something like that. It's exceedingly unsettling. But when you think of the wicked laying out a trap for someone, being caught in it, like some sort of, they lay out some scheme, like some hustle to rip someone off. But the very complexity of the lies and stuff, or somehow the attention of the authorities is brought upon them because of whatever fact, it's like the thing they were doing actually ends up being their snare. I mean, there's a lot of ways that can happen. For the wicked boasteth of his heart's desire, and blesseth the covetous, whom the Lord abhorreth. This is part of what, there's a parable a lot of people don't understand in the Gospel of Luke. We talked about it, right? The parable of the, not the unjust judge, of the unjust steward. And a lot of people think, because at the conclusion, the unjust steward is praised by also the wicked king, or his lord, the thing had come that he had wasted his master's goods. And he says, how am I going to deal with this? Because I'm going to be put out of my house. I'm going to be put out of my position, actually. And I'm going to be absolutely destitute because he had not managed his master's affairs well. So he goes around to all his master's debtors and he writes down their debts. While he still has power, he changes everything. Right? And then, and when the master finds out, he praises him for being shrewd. You know what I mean? Because he says, I'm gonna make these people all my friends, and that way, when I'm put out of my job, I can go to their houses and they'll owe me one. And he praised him, and it's because he was shrewd. And it says, what did it say? And Jesus concludes by saying, and I said to you, Make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness. Right? That they may receive you into everlasting habitations. He's saying that ironically. I remember someone saying, I don't think Jesus would ever say anything ironically. Well, he did right there. I'm telling you. Because the idea is that his boss, I forgot if he's a king or whatever, the master of the steward is also wicked. And so he approves of wickedness. If you're a person who seeks righteousness, this is a hard thing to get around your head. But crooks have, you've heard of organized crime, and there is a certain admiration among the wicked of those that are wicked like them, because they despise you. You're a chump. You know what I mean? You're a chump. You work for a living. But they're smart. They're clever. They know how to steal, embezzle, and whatever else, extort. They sell things that are legal that are very profitable, like drug selling and stuff like that. They do those things, and they think, we're so clever. We're so much better than you, chump. And then they see another person who's covetous, who would be hated of God, someone who looking around, what can I get? And they're like, that's a man after my own heart. Someone who knows what's really important in life, which is, getting everything you can get. Getting everything you can get your hands on. That's what they know. They see someone with stuff, they go, there's a guy I really can admire. Someone who's gotten for himself all the pleasures of this life. They have heaped to themselves, and then you can see it in the way which that the wicked are admired in the world. They're very much admired, especially covetous. People love the covetous. They love people who are filled with riches. Not just that they're rich, but the extravagant lifestyle. The thing is, you think about a guy like who's a guy? I'm trying to remember his name. Famous rich guy, but very quiet about it. Still one of the richest guys. What's his name? My wife could tell me because we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. It's not like one of the ones. It's not like one of the flashy ones. It's not like one of the ones that's political. He's quiet. He still lives in a little house. Doesn't have a great big mansion. I'm like, I want to say Norm. No. What is his name? It's on the tip of my tongue. It'll probably come to me later. Whatever. It's, and I'm not saying good, bad, or anything, but I'm just saying you don't hear much about him because he doesn't do flashy things with his wealth to show it off. So, to say, see what I've gotten with all my getting? The name's on the tip of my tongue. The wicked, through the pride of his countenance, will not seek after God. God is not at all in his thoughts. Countenance means face, right? Through his face, his pride. We have a term that comes from Asia. I think it's Japanese, but the idea of saving face. In the sense of I can't show my face in public. I will not be able to face other people. I've got to save it. Meaning I got, let me not be ashamed. Find a way that I can save so I can at least show my face in public and not be humiliated in front of everybody. That's the idea of saving face, is to prevent humiliation. Public humiliation is very stressful on really most people. There's some people who don't care at all. But this is something I've talked about. It's sometimes if you try to argue with someone, whether it's another Christian about doctrine, because one of you is wrong, right? Or both, maybe, right? One or both of you are wrong. You have an argument with a brother, It's very unlikely that both are right and just not saying, maybe you're both right. It's like, maybe not. Probably not. Right? But you might argue with someone, and at least in that moment, the argument is about their pride. It's not about the actual facts of what you're talking about. You have to be careful that it's not about your pride. I mean, when I have, when I have a discussion with someone, I want to be aware. And I want to make sure I'm listening to the degree that I want to be able to hear the voice of God. My thoughts have to be not about like, I want to win, I want to show this person up, I'm right, but rather, what's the truth? I'm open to the truth. That doesn't mean I'm open to every silly idea, but that means I don't get my pride involved with worrying about being shown up. If I get shown up, I get shown up. The truth belongs to God. You know what I mean? Ultimately, God's going to, it's like, I might get shown up now, but later on, it's all going to come out. It's just like with, God, sometimes it seems like God has hid his face, you're on the cross, and you think like, hey, pretty much this is it. And then all of a sudden you're standing up again in resurrection, and like, well, I guess that wasn't it. And the wicked see my justification, and they themselves cast out. Yeah, it's the justice comes. But a lot of times through the pride of, through our pride that we do not want to appear, because countenance is when you talk about someone's face, it's like the appearance, their public appearance, their face. A lot of times because like you get so invested in a position, whether it's I don't believe in God, or I am so invested in this wickedness that I'll be ashamed to turn to God, or if people should see me in church. You know what I mean? Like I said, I remember one time I was listening to some pastor preach. He was talking about the fool has said in his heart there is no God. He was saying, hey, basically, he didn't say it like this, but this is how I'll take it. He was saying, like, don't think about atheists, think about yourself. You know what I mean? When have you said in your heart there is no God? You know what I mean? And the truth is, whenever we sin, it's like a manifestation of our doubts. You know what I mean? Because we don't have, or because we forget. It's not so. It's a manifestation of our lack of awareness that God is not in our thoughts completely. Certainly not in the moment we allow ourselves to sin. We're not thinking of God at that moment. We're thinking only of ourselves. I pray that we would be the type that do seek God, because the wicked don't. They will not seek God. God is not at all in their thoughts. His ways are always grievous. The judgments are far above out of his sight. As for all his enemies, he puffeth at them. He hath said in his heart, I shall not be moved, for I shall never be in adversity. I've got everything wrapped up. I've got my riches. I've got my security. I've got my my retirement plans. I got my bigger barns. I have my producers are my fields are producing so plentifully. I need to build bigger storage for it. And now I've built that, and I have stuff laid aside for many years. I can lay myself on my bed at night and go, everything is just great. And just feel the absolute peace that comes from the security that you work by your own hands. And even if it's wicked, it's like I've taken away, but nobody knows. I've stolen and nobody can find me. I've killed and they don't know where the bodies are. All those things, the wicked in their grievous ways, the judgment of God, that's like not in the picture, out of sight, out of mind. And the wicked always end up having enemies, right? But my enemies, I'm strong. I have, I have weapons, I have security, whatever it is, whatever. And I'm not going to be moved. I'm never going to, kind of trouble is never going to come to me. I'm prepared. I'm wise. His mouth is full of cursing and deceit and fraud. Under his tongue is mischief and vanity. Then we have the tongue. Cursing, deceit, and fraud. They don't confuse cursing with simple sentence-enhancing profanity, which is not necessarily a good thing. But we all have to do with profane things. We all have to use the toilet. That's a profane thing. It's a profane place. Every once in a while, it becomes necessary to talk about the profane parts of the body or the profane parts of life. Things that are far from sacred. That's the practical meaning of profane, means far from sacred or far from the sacred place. But, that's a metaphorical representation of the sacred place is over here, and here's the, you don't put the outhouse in the middle of the church. You don't put it on the altar. The plate, the altar isn't a toilet seat. The altar of God. It's very opposite. It's so very wrong, right? That picture's close. That thing goes out way over there. And God is over here, and the profane is over there. So it has nothing to do with God. So that's why it's always a bit touchy to be too, if you find yourself, if we're too profane, too much in the profane, and then we're far from God. We want to put our minds on God. But this is cursing. Cursing is like, damn you. It's much more strong. It's something, a Christian should not curse. Should not bring curses down on people. And if we pray for someone, if I have an enemy and they're of great danger to me, there's nothing wrong with praying that God would do something to them that would necessitate, they would open their eyes to turn from their wicked ways. And that may not be something pleasant. Fine. Lord, if you want to do something that would be very unpleasant for them, I would be much obliged. Not because of punitive thoughts, like I just want to hurt them, but let them turn, and if they won't turn them away from me. If they won't turn to you, at least turn them back from what they're doing to me. Because I know you avenge the righteous. I know you avenge the righteous, and if he hurts me the way he's trying to, great vengeance will come upon him. Great vengeance, I know and trust. So, Lord, save the wicked from his folly, and let him not persecute me. Bloody his nose, that you don't have to cut off his head. Mouth full of cursing and deceit and fraud. The difference between deceit and fraud, I'm not going to be specific, but you understand there can be kind of a difference when you defraud someone versus you deceive them. I think deceiving is like you play a trick in their mind. You make them think something. Fraud is where you make it's more of like an external thing. At least in the English, the way it strikes me is this here is a genuine, number 2 pencil, or whatever. This is not a number 2 pencil. It's a carpenter's pencil. But you get them to believe something. Maybe you sell them a horse. I don't know. I thought of a horse. A used car. Oh, it's great. You can do it in a fraudulent way. Here's the records of all the maintenance we've had done. Just had a new engine put in, but they're all fake records. And then take the money and disappear. Deceit is like, come over here, I want to show you something. It's a little different, right? Under his tongue is mischief and vanity. Mischief. We think of mischief as like this innocent thing. Oh, he's such a mischievous boy. It's like naughty. It used to be a very strong word. Naughty and mischief. Obviously, we have some sort of idea of miss means like... I never bothered to look into the meaning of the English word mischief, like where it's derived. Obviously it's something... it's got the prefix miss in it, like mishandle, mislead, mischief. Or maybe that is actually has no... Maybe that's not a prefix. It's just... But let me just check the Hebrew, what it's going to give me. It's probably, a lot of times this is not helpful, to tell you the truth. And just so I don't, let's do this the right way. So many clicks to do it the right way, though, I'll tell you. Oh, look at mischief, amal, labor, trouble, toil. It's like working. It's that evil that works. It's like we're going to get into some mischief here. I mean, working actual evil. I'm not going to look up the English word mischief because it's not necessary. But like it's toiling for evil. It's evil that takes a bit of work and planning and forethought, as opposed to just something that done impulsively. It's the evil of toil. It's It's the evil of toil. And aven, vanity. That's a word. That's a good word. That's a good translation of aven. It means emptiness, nothingness. It can mean wickedness in that sense. In fact, it's translated wickedness sometimes, but wickedness as being empty of any good, as being also vain, worthless. That's aven. And the way they used it in the Old Testament, there was a place called Bethel, which means the house of God. Beth is house. Bethel was the house of God. And when they built the golden calf there, the prophets changed the name of it to Beth Aven, which is the word for vanity here, the house of emptiness, the house of vanity, house of wickedness. It means all those things, depending on how you're using the word. A lot of words have various implications. Just like in English, you think about the context, the way we use the word bad in our modern times. Sometimes it can even mean good, because it has to do with like severity. Well, that's bad, man. That's one bad guitar lick. You play the guitar badly. Means it's genuinely not good. I remember, I don't use that slang. I remember one time I played a guitar part for someone and he said it was bad, but he said, "That's bad, man." And I was confused for a second because I should have known by his inflection what he meant. And sometimes the words are like that. He sitteth in the lurking places of the villages. In the secret places doth he murder the innocent. His eyes are privily set against the poor. This is very wicked. And I say, though, while these are great truths, I try to take it in a way that is useful for me to build myself up and away from wickedness towards ultimate righteousness in Christ. I don't want to lurk. We know it's wrong to murder the innocent. We know it's murder, right? Well, people who murder innocent children or whatever, or just innocent anybody, was one of the most terrible crimes, right? I mean, sometimes people murder each other and you're kind of like, it's like he walked in and he found his wife in bed with another man, or she walked in and whatever, or like someone stole from them and they chased him down and shot him. It's like, and maybe and they did it in such a way that it was murder. Shoot a fleeing man in the back or something like that, because that's murder, right? And obviously there's degrees. Just like one of the things I point out very frequently is in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus talks about the commandments. He says, "You've heard it was said of them of old time, thou shalt not kill." And he goes through, "Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, and thou shalt not bear false witness." Or he also talks about divorce a little bit in that path. But he sets a more righteous standard. He says, "You've heard it was not, thou shalt not kill, but I say to you, whoever's angry with his brother is in danger of the judgment. Whoever says to his brother, Raka," which I was speculating. I'm like, is that the equivalent of like, F you? Is that, like, and then he says, "Thou fool," which seems like Sometimes people act the fool. What does it mean? I can never say any kind of. It's very dependent on the spirit in which things are said. You know what I mean? Because I think the idea is there is a murderous intent in that, not necessarily of someone's life, but a disregarding of their life, a disregarding of their importance to God. That if I'm important to God, that they also are important to God, or I should at least regard them as so if I'd like God to keep thinking of me as important. You know what I mean? I want to treat people as I want to be treated. I want to behave towards other people the way I want God to behave towards me. And so murder, I can lie in wait, I can lurk in my life in other wicked ways. I'm not saying I'm particularly prone to this, but people do this to their loved ones. Where they set about laying snares and traps. And it's almost like they're acting, there's this hostility within family relationships, even with our loved ones, or with strangers, people you don't know. Planning. I'm trying to think of like, for instance, like I can bring ill repute to the name of Christ through my actions. You know what I mean? And thus cause someone to think like, well, if that's what Christians are like, I don't want to have any part of that. You know what I mean? I can harden men. I can, through my bad behavior, harden men's hearts against the gospel. You know what I mean? That can be kind of like murdering the innocent. Turning us, whoever shall offend one of these little ones, Jesus said. It talks about murdering innocent people. Jesus whoever will offend them, make them stumble. It's not offend like, but it can be like that. I mean, it can be in the sense that it causes them to, just as it said of the wicked, right? It says, through their pride they will not seek after God. God is not at all in their thoughts. There are other reasons why people might not seek after God. And we can be responsible for that. You know what I mean? By the way, if we start looking at other people with hostility, other human beings with a hostile intent, like I'll fix them. You know what I mean? That maybe not necessarily murderous, but malicious. Wanting to see them get in trouble, wanting to embarrass them, humiliate them. Because through people's humiliation, when people are humiliated, or you attempt to humiliate them, or they find themselves, they discover themselves, they discover for themselves that you are their enemy. You know what I mean? That you are trying to bring about some form of harm, either mental, physical, or in any other way, financial, right? Or just any other kind of aggression against another person. You can be, especially if you're a Christian and known, even if you're not known, if it's found out. What will they, what does that do? That's what Jesus said. They cause the little ones to stumble. That's almost like, like I said in the Sermon on the Mount, he says, hey, there's murder, but what about anger with your brothers? It's like, yeah, there's murder. And what about causing the little ones to stumble? He said it'd be better for them to have a millstone hung around their neck and cast into the sea. I remember, like I said, I've been on social media where you see like people put these posters of like, they'll put a little picture of a guy with a millstone around his neck being kind of falling into the water, sinking. And they say this is what should happen to child molesters, because they think that verse is about child molesters. It's like, you don't need a verse like that. That of course is also, that is that's like murder, of course. But he was saying even lesser offenses. I know a lot of parents who have murdered their children, They've murdered their children. They do. Parents murder their children all the time. Christian parents. Because they don't raise them right. And then they send them off to college. And they become unbelievers. And sometimes it has nothing to do with the parent. They did everything right. Though, what is the probability of that? I'd say I've tried to do a pretty good job. People compliment me. My children themselves praise me as a father. Okay? That's why I remember 20. I have a very rough relationship with my mother. And in fact, I have very little relationship with her because they're so diametrically opposed that the best way I feel is sometimes to get along is to not have an encounter. And I don't need a mother right now. I'm grown up. You know what I mean? The only mother I'm concerned with is the mother of my children. And she's fine. If she was in trouble, I would be there to help the one who nursed me as a child. You know what I mean? But I remember it was 20 odd years ago. I was explaining the problems I was having with her at the time. She said, "Wait till you have kids, Paul. Wait till you have kids. I can't wait to see what happens to you." I'm like, that's fine. When I have kids, then we'll ask them what they think of me as a parent. If they think I have done badly as a parent, if they say you were a bad dad, then I think that's probably right. You know what I mean? Because like I have no problems in my life that I blame my mother for. I'll be quite frankly, I don't blame her for any of my problems. You know what I mean? But I will certainly say, yeah, you were a bad mom. You know, period. And that's just the assessment. That's just the truth, because it's manifest in that our relationship turned out terrible. We have a terrible relationship. We have none at all, really, now. I mean, when we do, it's not good. I mean, and that's that. You can still honor. I do honor. It's like, but I can only honor so far. I can't say like, oh, she was great. It's like, no. You know what I mean? Like to me, honor is like what you are due. You know what I mean? My children don't praise me with lies. But anyways, even though they will praise me, I know I made mistakes. I've even talked about them. Even then, they said, "Well, you did it for the right reason." And I think I've talked about that before. At the time I gave an undeserved spanking to somebody because I couldn't get at what was really going on, and I inquired, and I thought something really bad was going on, and so I gave someone a spanking because I thought they were lying to me. And it was just, I couldn't see any way forward. And I found out later, what the problem was, what had actually happened. We all discovered, and I was like, ugh, like, there we go. Big mistake, right? Am I resented for it? No, because I immediately owned the mistake. I said, I'm sorry, that was a big mistake. But I thought this, and this is why it was important. And everyone said, that was good. Fine. But even there are probably other ways in which I haven't done everything right? But still, they don't turn their backs on the faith of their father, and they have a generally good opinion of what I was as a father, and they're adults now, so I feel justified in what I said. I said, I will let my children judge me. 20 years have gone by. I've got their judgment. But when they turn their back, but there are parents who raise their kids in the faith, but they do it carelessly. They just think like, I'll cram verses down their throats. I'll send them to Sunday school. I will make them memorize verses. It's like that. I'll start at a very young age, indoctrinate, push. You don't know how easy that stuff is to break. I understood from the beginning that and this is something I'm thankful I learned from my mother, that the strongest kind of bond is that of love. Because when you don't have love, you definitely know it's missing. You know what I mean? I honor my mother, but I do not love her. I do not love her. And that's like a hole in my life. You know what I mean? I can't. It's not in me. You know what I mean? And knowing that that's missing made me understand how important it was to use love and not I'm not saying not punishment, actually. It's not that. Because that's all I understood was the importance of love. Obviously, I turned out, my mom wasn't a person of faith, really. You know, my dad was. And I loved him. But, I mean, it's rather personal, but whatever. I think it's important because your children, you want them, one of the things a lot of Christians want is their children to grow up and have faith and to believe in the Lord. And and to have a relationship with God. And your own relationship with them is important in that. Just shoving them into a Sunday school or, battering them over the head with it. And, it's one of those things I was setting out when I was doing the head of household thing. I know that was liked by a number of people. But, a lot of people liked it, but I don't have it just the time. And also, I feel like it's not really for this channel. It's like something else. Anyways. And plus, it's like, I don't know. Whenever I talk about it, I'm like, I almost feel like I need a little syllabus and like talk about different subjects and make sure I cross them off so I don't like go over them 50 times, which is what will happen. I'll tell the same stories over and over again, and I knew that would happen. I did not want to get into that. So the ones that are there are good. Maybe it's the kind of thing people would like to listen over and over again. I don't know. But anyways. We don't know the ways we lurk in our children's lives and do them harm. But we have to be conscious of, do we do them harm? And in some, like I said, on some level, it's like they may turn their backs on the Lord and it has nothing to do with us. And you'll know because a lot of times kids, they go to church and they become resentful of the religion they grew up in. Here's the hard part for parents. You may not even know what's happening. You know what I mean? Because you don't know what's going on in Sunday school. I thought it was interesting. The parents, like, I can't even send my kids to regular school because I don't trust what they're going to say to them, what's going to happen. Like I said, my first day of first grade, I sat down at a little table with a little girl, cute little girl, glasses, looked innocent as can be. And she proceeded to tell me all these really dirty jokes about sexual intercourse. I'm like 6 years old. You know what I mean? That's what I'm running into in school. And it wasn't entirely surprising because she didn't explain to me what it was, but I know that's what what was being described in the jokes. That was what was being described in the jokes. And that's quite, explicit stuff. That's what who's my kid sitting next to? What's that kid like? The whole year they're going to sit next to that person. They're going to have some kind of like something, or not. Maybe they're going to be mean to him. Not that, hey, that's good. Be mean to him. Suffer. Experience things. It's not a big deal. That part of it. But it's like I like to control the raising of my children. And when in Sunday school, you just say, go downstairs. Sure, go down. Who knows what their heads are being filled with? I don't know. When you send them, do you ask? Do you go, hey, what'd you learn in Sunday school today? Some parents do. And a lot of times it's probably really great and everything works out fine and your kids grow up Christians just like you wanted. I'm just saying, take care though. You know what I mean? Don't foster resentment. Don't foster, a lot of times parents, we also for the pride of our face, we want to just do it our way. We want to barrel through. We don't realize maybe we're crushing someone and eventually, there's something called repression. It's a well-known psychological thing. You push someone in a certain direction. Eventually, when they're children, they kind of like this, but eventually there's a spring back against it. I remember one of the mistakes my parents made was like, girls are evil. You should have nothing to do with them. And when I became an adult, I couldn't wait to get married. Couldn't wait. Not that I needed to wait anyway, so it's like, and I always try to encourage people, family members, sometimes when they're in these relationships, like, get married. Just get married. She's so great. You're sleeping together. You must think she's pretty great. Why not get married? Everyone's reluctant. Oh, this can't do. Or like, we got to finish school. What's that? That would be the answer. Like, we don't want to have a baby. Don't have children while you're going to school by all means. But it's like, you're living together. You've been together for ages. You can get married. Anyways. Let's see. How many verses? Oh, there's still about a psalm left. That's good. He lieth in wait secretly as a lion. Man, there's now we're over an hour. We're just gonna start with verse 10. That's okay. So what I'm saying is, there's more ways than one. Don't just read scriptures in the Old Testament and say that's about really wicked people. I'm nothing like that. I wouldn't lay in wait to murder the innocent. I wouldn't set snares. But it's like, you understand that the Lord Jesus preached of a greater and more perfect form of righteousness. I'm as righteous as a Pharisee. Me? According to the righteousness, aside from the external things, as I don't wear the right clothes, I've shaved, I don't have a beard on, I'm not wearing phylacteries and those kind of things, and I enjoy the meat of all kinds of animals. I am a typical heathen Gentile. I do not ascribe to Jewish customs. But as far as like, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, I've kept all these things from my youth. I've kept them all from my youth, according to the standards that they, hey, I've kept them all from my youth. I've been, even beyond that, to some degree. To some degree, I've kept it even better. It's on the moral side of things. But it's still not good enough. It's nowhere near good. I'm not a good person, except by comparison to the most wicked men in the world. I'm significantly more righteous than the most wicked men in the world. But that is not how we are supposed to think. That leads to holier than thou thinking. The way you think is in terms of, how righteous am I compared to Christ? How righteous am I compared to Christ? How much am I unlike a murderer of innocence? Versus how much am I unlike Christ? I'm more like a murderer of innocence than I am like Christ. When you look at it from a certain perspective. Okay. Thanks for joining this study. I look forward to being back again tomorrow to continue through the Psalms. We're not going to stop at 10. I haven't figured out exactly where we're going to stop yet, but we will do a number of more Psalms. We'll go on for a while. Maybe we'll do like 20 and then, or something. I'm not sure the exact number. Anyways, until tomorrow.
I am afflicted very much. Quicken me, O Lord, according to thy word. Accept, I beseech thee, the freewill offerings of my mouth, O Lord, and teach me thy judgments. My soul is continually in my hand, yet I do not forget thy law. The wicked have laid a snare for me, yet I heard not from thy precepts. Thy testimonies have I taken as an heritage forever. For they are the rejoicing of my heart. I have inclined my heart to perform thy statutes always even.